Today we're going to learn how to do a pre-trip to pass the MELT exam, and for the pre-trip we need to first of all chock our wheels, turn on our four-way flashes to warn people of the safety in the area, and also release our brakes so we can adjust our slack adjusters. As we walk up to the front of the vehicle, we're looking for any physical damage to the front of the truck. We're also going to be checking the truck into sections to make it easy to do our pre-trip, dividing it basically from the middle of the vehicle coming up. We're going to be looking at the cowling up at the top to make sure there's no damage up there, nothing's hanging off the vehicle, and everything looks in good condition. Coming down the side of the vehicle, you're also going to check here to make sure there's nothing again hanging off or no physical damage to the top or bottom of the cowling, and that all the general condition looks good before we lift the hood. As we walk up to the front of the vehicle, we're looking for any physical damage to the front of the truck. We're also going to be checking the truck into sections to make it easy to do our pre-trip, dividing it basically from the middle of the vehicle coming up. We're going to be looking at the cowling up at the top to make sure there's no damage up there, nothing's hanging off the vehicle, and everything looks in good condition. Coming down the side of the vehicle, you're also going to check here to make sure there's nothing again hanging off or no physical damage to the top or bottom of the cowling, and that all the general condition looks good before we lift the hood. Again, now we have the hood lifted, we're looking at the top of the cowling here, basically looking for any loose rivets. There's no damage to the top of the cowling. Looking down at the mirror arm is securely mounted to the frame. We're going to check our sun visor here to make sure there's no damage, and we're looking at our windshield, looking across here for any cracks or stone chips. We're also going to be looking at our wiper blades here to make sure that they're touching the glass and that there's no damage to them and they're securely mounted. We're checking onto the cowling here to make sure that's securely mounted to the bulkhead. Coming down the vehicle, we're looking at the hoses here and we're looking for any clamps. We're looking to make sure that there is nothing loose, no bending or bulging in the pipes, and that there's no leaks. Coming into the engine bay here, we're going to look through the engine onto the engine itself, looking for any oil leaks. Looking again now, following that hose is down, all our wiring is good. We're following the top hose here to make sure that there's no leaks, and again there's nothing dripping off. Forward of the alternator, we're looking at the fan blades here to make sure there's no damage to the blades. We're looking at the radiator, making sure there's nothing leaking on the radiator, and at the cowling and everything around it all looks secure. And the shroud moving. Looking to the right of the fan blades, we see our expansion tank. The cap is on, the level is good, and it is securely mounted. Going forward to the air-to-air here, this is the air-to-air, it is securely mounted to the frame rail, and it is not loose. Looking at the clamps on the hoses, they're not bulging, they're securely mounted, and there's nothing leaking. Looking to the right of the fan blades, we see our expansion tank. The cap is on, the level is good, and it is securely mounted. Going forward to the air-to-air here, this is the air-to-air, it is securely mounted to the frame rail, and it is not loose. Looking at the clamps on the hoses, they're not bulging, they're securely mounted, and there's nothing leaking. Coming back to the next clamp, again it is securely mounted, there's nothing leaking, there is no bulges, and the clamps are on. Going forward to the turbo, we're looking at the turbo area here, which is located here. We're making sure that the clamps are on, there is no soot, and there is no oil leaks. Moving back down, we're coming down under the engine, we're looking inside the engine here. We're looking for any condition, oil leaks, or again any damage. Again, we have our bottom radiator hose, it is not bulging, the clamps are on, and it is securely mounted. Coming forward, we're now looking down here at a spring hanger, making sure it is securely mounted to the chassis. All the bolts are in, there is nothing loose, there are no shiny spots, and it is securely mounted to the spring. Here we have our water bottle, and we can see that the cap is on, the level is good, and again it is securely mounted. Looking behind here, we have our shock absorber. It is securely mounted to the frame, and it is not leaking. And all the bolts are in. Looking at the spring, we can check the spring running across here, that there is no cracks in the spring, and that the U-clamps are on, they're securely mounting to the axle, and it is running in alignment, and there are no cracks in the spring. Coming off the axle, we have our brake chamber. The hoses going to the brake chamber don't appear to be damaged. It is an automatic adjuster, so we will check for less than 1 inch of travel by placing the screwdriver in there and checking the travel stroke. As we look at our brake chamber, we're going to place our screwdriver to the top of it. We're going to push away, and we're checking that the stroke here is less than 1 inch of travel, which is required for an automatic slack adjuster. If it was out of adjustment, we would give 2 to 12 full brake applications above 100 psi. Giving 2 applications, letting it stop and making sure the air builds back up. To be classified as a full brake application, it does require to be over 100 psi for every stroke, holding the brake pedal down for 2 to 3 seconds, giving it a chance to ratchet and readjust. After checking the brake chamber, we're looking inside the wheel and we're looking for any damage to the rim itself, making sure the rim is in good condition. We are also checking to make sure there are no visible oil leaks from the hub seal that could have leaked, and the general condition on the inside of the rim is in good condition. Moving across, we're going to check the tyre wall to make sure there are no bulges or cuts in the tyre wall or anything that could cause possible damage. Moving over across the top of the tyre wall, we're checking the tread to make sure it has adequate tread and that there is no damage or cuts or nails in the tread. We'll then go to the outside fascia of the tyre, where again we're now checking the tyre wall condition to make sure that there's no damage, cuts or cords showing. After checking the outside of the tyre, we are now looking at the rim. We're checking the rim again for any damage, cuts, chips in the rim, and also checking all the lug nuts to make sure they are securely mounted. There is no shiny spots and there is no signs of fresh rust. So checking all the lug nuts around here to make sure they're all secure. We're now going to check the center cap to make sure again there is nothing leaking, there is no signs of an oil seal failure, and we're also going to check our valve stem cap to make sure it is on the unit and it is securely mounted. After completing the first section of the walk around, we're going to continue around to the opposite side. On the way around, we're going to do a visual inspection. We're going to touch onto our mirrors to make sure they're securely mounted to the HUD, and again walking around checking the general condition of the vehicle. As we continue around the vehicle, we will start doing the same inspection on the opposite side. So again, we will look at the cowling. We're making sure all the bolts are in alignment on the cowling and that the sun visor is attached and not broken. We're going to be looking at the windshield to make sure there's no cracks. The wiper blades are touching the windshield and the general condition is satisfactory. We're looking at the black cowling here to make sure it is all secure and mounted. Behind the air filter here, we're looking for the treadle valve, which is located here, where the air lines are all running up to, and we're going to listen for any possible air leaks. We're now going to be looking at the airbox itself to make sure there is no debris inside the airbox, and it all appears to be clean, it's free from any nests or any animals that could have made a nest in there, and it's satisfactory for use. We're also going to be now looking at the top rad hoses, and we're making sure that again that there's nothing cracking, there's no signs of bulges, and all clamps appear to be tight. From this side of the engine, we will look now down at the fan blades, again checking them. Also looking through as best we can to check on our pulleys and alignments here, so we're looking at the pulleys to make sure that they're running in alignment from this side and there's no visible cracks or damage to them. We're going to check on our oil cap to make sure our oil cap is on and tight. We're going to continue to run down our top hose here to make sure the clamps are on here and it is not bulging. We're also going to take the oil out and we're going to check the level of the oil to make sure it's satisfactory. We're going to look in behind at our secondary fuel filter, making sure that that's satisfactory and not leaking. We have our primary glass bowl filter here, and as we can see there's slight residue in the bottom of it of water. Once it gets to the top of that level and it's situated up to the top here, it would then require that filter be changed out. In the event of winter and it's freezing, you can sometimes have gelling in there, which will actually stop the vehicle. So it's a good idea to carry 1 or 2 spare filters in the vehicle that you can then change out at the roadside should you be put into a breakdown situation. Again, as we're looking at the engine, we're going to be checking for any visible oil leaks down here. We're also looking at the steering shaft here, checking for the linkages to make sure there's no excessive play, and it appears to be running true and in alignment. We're going to come across to our power steering fluid. We're checking that the level is good and that the cap is on and it is not leaking. We're following the hoses down, again making sure there's no visible leaks. As we come across to our steering box here, we're going to be checking on this U-joint here to make sure it's secure, there's no play in it. And we're going to continue to follow the steering box down, checking down here at the castle nuts to make sure the castle nuts are in place, following the linkages across. We have another castle nut down here, so we're making sure that nut is on and tight and secure. And again, we have another brake chamber here, which we will be checking for less than 1 inch of travel. Also coming back into the inside of the rim, where we're now going to be checking the tyre wall again, and also looking for any oil leaks on the inside of the rim, showing that there could be a potential oil seal gone. Coming back to the outside of the tyre, we're going to check our tread pattern again to make sure the tread pattern at the top of the tyre is adequate and fit for the journey. Looking down to the sidewall and the front, there is no visible damage, cords showing, or anything that's going to cause any potential hazards along the way. Coming back onto the rim, we're checking the rim for any dents, cuts, chips in the rim that cause an issue, and all the lug nuts are tight, no shiny spots, and nothing appears to be loose. Looking at the center cap again for any oil leak that could be gone there from the front side of the oil seal, causing us a problem along the way. After completing this, we're now going to move to the side of the vehicle, and we're going to look again back up at the top, and we're checking all the cowling bolts here to make sure there's no damage to the cowling, and then we're going to split the vehicle down its side, and we're going to look into make it into sections to make it easier to conduct. We are looking here down the side. The mirror seems to be securely mounted, it is not loose, and the glass is not cracked or damaged. We're following the door down, we're going to open the door up, and as we open the door up, we're going to lift up on the door here. We're going to give it a lift to the bottom to make sure that the pins and the hinges appear to be good and the door is functioning. As we look inside the vehicle, we're going to check to make sure we have a fire extinguisher. The fire extinguisher is securely mounted, the pin is in, and it is fully charged. After closing the door, we're going to continue looking down. We have our marker light flashing. The step is secure and the def cap is on the def tank. We're going to lift up here and we're going to look at our batteries. When we look inside, we're looking for any shiny spots, or any corrosion to the terminals, anything loose or anything that could cause a charging issue, causing us a problem on the route. After closing that, we're going to continue looking down. We're going to give the step a kick to make sure it's securely mounted to the frame and there's nothing loose there. Underneath the vehicle, we have our primary and secondary air tank, which we drain daily by pulling these. Coming down to the back section of the vehicle here, we're going to check the cowling again at the top, making sure all the rivets are in place. There is no damage to the side of it. The work light at the back is securely mounted and in place. As we can see here, it is not hanging down or loose. Continuing down the glass is all fine, it's not cracked. We're coming down, the locker is all good. Lights are flashing, cap is on the def cap and it's securely mounted. Looking underneath the truck, we can see there's no leaks. Coming around the back of the vehicle, we're checking the straps on the tank, looking for anything that could be causing any issue or wear to the back of the truck, and as we can see, it's all satisfactory. Looking up, all our airlines are securely mounted and in place, and there's no signs of chafing or damage to the airlines. Back to the top of the vehicle, we can see we have our reflective strips on the top and on both sides, and that there's no damage to anything that we can see, and that the smokestack is all securely mounted, no fresh soot or oil, and it all appears to be in generally good condition. As we come down to the back of the vehicle, we're going to be looking here at the plate to make sure again it is securely mounted to the frame. We're also going to be looking over here at the cab mount bags, which are situated right here. You're basically checking those for any air leaks that you can hear, any audible leaks. Looking down your frame rail, you're going to make sure all the bolts on the frame rail are securely mounted and that our spring hanger bolts are again no shiny spots, nuts are all in place and there's nothing loose. Looking down with rail, we can see all the mounting hardware for the fifth wheel again is all in place, there's no shiny spots and all the bolts are there. We're also going to look inside the frame rail here and we're looking at these rails situated right here where we're looking for the locking pins to make sure the slide for the fifth wheel is securely mounted. As far as we can down on the drive line to make sure the drive line isn't appearing to be twisted and there's no damage to it. Looking at the U-joint situated here, making sure there's no excessive play. Looking at the differentials here to make sure there's no apparent leaks, and again on our half shaft we're checking this joint here to make sure there's no play in it and nothing signs of damage. Coming on the outside of the frame rail, we can see our brake chamber situated right there, and we're going to look underneath and we're going to check to make sure there's no excessive play in that and it's within the 1 inches of tolerances as demonstrated on the front axle by placing the screwdriver in there and checking its travel. Looking at the rail, the spring here, we can make sure that the spring is on alignment and that the U-bolts are attached and it is secure. Coming further on, we have our shock absorber, which again is the bolts are in. There's no apparent leaks to the shock absorber and it is securely mounted. Coming forward of that, we have our airbag, which is inflated, and if we hit it, you can hear that it's got air in there and it's like hitting a tyre. It's solid and there's no leaks. The airbag is not allowed to be patched and there can be no attempts to be repaired. Once getting to the inside of the rim, again as on the front axle, we're looking at the inside of the rim for any damage to the rim, any oil leaks, any hub seals that could be going on the inside of the tyre wall. Coming across the tyre wall, we're going to make sure there is adequate tread pattern, and now going down into the inside of the first tyre wall, we're going to make sure there's no damage to that tyre, and also that the rims are touching and there is no debris lodged in between the wheels. Then moving forward of that, we're going to go to the outside of the first tyre, again checking for any damage, checking the tread pattern, there's adequate tread for the travel, coming down to the outside, and it is in good condition, there is no cords showing, there's no cuts, and nothing causing any damage to the rim. Looking inside the rim, we're going to make sure all the lug nuts are on, There's no shiny spots, no fresh rust, and everything appears to be tight. And there is also no leaking from the hub seal, and we're going to make sure that we have 2 valve stem caps, one for either tyre, visible from the outside. At the back of the truck we can see we have our mud flap hanging on here, and it is securely mounted with a reflector on it. Coming across the back, again we'll check the pintle hitch on this particular truck, making sure it is securely mounted and that the bolts are in place. Looking into the inside of the frame rail, we can see the rear axle and making sure there's no visible leaks from there. And again, no audible air leaks coming from any of the airlines on this side. Moving to the outside, we're going to check the shock absorber and the airbag. Airbag situated right here, and it's not leaking, it is inflated. And we can see the shock absorber is securely mounted. And we can also see in front of that we have our U-joints mounting to the axle, the front spring. Again, on the outside, we can see that the lug nuts are all on, and that our valve stem caps situated here have valve stem caps on. If the tyre has been mounted correctly, the valve stems should be 180 degrees apart on the rim. So you should have one on one side, and directly opposite should be the other tyre stem. Again, moving forward, we can see our frame rail, and we can see the bolts are all in. There's no fresh rust or shiny spots. The hanger is mounted, coming down, and we can check that, again, the general condition that the U-bolts are all in place. And we also repeat this exactly the same for the remaining rear tyres, checking that the general condition is good, no debris, rims are touching, and no oil leaks, and it has adequate tread. Moving forward of that, you're going to go to the front quarter fender, which again is securely mounted to the frame rail, and there's no damage. Finally, we're going to start on the opposite side, and we can see that our cowling is good, our work light is securely mounted, there is no damage to the side of the vehicle, and that the glass is good. Continuing down to make sure there's nothing sticking out or going to cause any hazards along the way. Moving down, we have our hazard lights, which is securely mounted. We have our death cap, which